What? Uh, well, how, what was hello, miladies. How how how's it going? Hey guys, so it's been a little while since I've done a YouTube video, since like December or so, um, and I wanted to make this one today because I've this channel, since last year now. Whoa, has been about writing and books and art and such for the most part. Talk about some other stuff, but for the most part, it's been about that. Um, does that make me a booktuber? Whoa. So I figured a good video to make would be to talk about all the books I read in 2020. Because it's fun. It's fun for me. Probably a couple people would be interested. So last year, I started reading a lot again. I kind of like when I was a kid, I used to read a lot, even though I kind of like was slow to learn to read. At one point, I just like suddenly I figured it out, and I just read and read and read and read and read. But then a couple years during my teenage years, it started to slow down. I think part of it had to do with I was on the internet more, and I was gradually reading less and less every year until I read an embarrassingly low amount, which will not be disclosed in 2019. And I'm not trying to put down people who don't like reading or who just don't like reading very much. It's just embarrassing for me personally because like I'm a writer and like my whole thing is like books and stuff. So it's a little weird for me to not read that much. But a New Year's resolution, and I do happen to believe in New Year's resolutions a bit. I think they can be over glorified a little bit. But I disagree with people who are like, "Oh, they're worthless." Like they can be nice, they can be good, they can help. But anyway, one of my New Year's resolutions for 2020 was to read more, and I finally started reading more. In around May, I'd read one comic book. Kind of earlier that year, I actually finished it in May, I think. um, but I finally started reading more, and it was hard at first. But I learned some tips on how to do it. You just start with kind of 30 minutes a day. Tell yourself you'll do that 30 minutes, and eventually you start getting back into it. Or at least it worked for me this way. I started getting back into it, and I started liking reading more, and then I couldn't stop. And I try not to think of it as like this thing I have to do, but also make myself do it at the same time. It's a weird balance. Uh, and psychologically, I'm trying to make myself like just have fun with it, like when I was like 12, 13, middle school kid years. And reading more, by the way, this year or last year has, greatly affected the way I write, and the quality of what I write. I'd forgotten how much influence reading could have over writing. I knew it had a great influence, but I forgot just how substantial that was. And my writing got a lot better because of it. And I think reading a lot more was a big part of why It Stings became a thing. It Stings, for people who don't know, is my book that's coming out on March 10th on Amazon. Get it in Kindle and paperback. Okay, books I read. I don't know if I'll do them exactly in order. Well, we'll try. I have most of them here. A couple of them, at least one of them was from the library. One was an ebook, so I don't have them, but whatever. First one I read was that graphic novel, The Killing Joke, Batman. First time I read that, loved Batman, but I have not read as many of the Batman comics as I would like to have. Um, Thought it was good. It's good graphic novel. It was it was good Batman. One of the best Batmans. Not as good as Long Halloween. But it's good. It is a good Joker backstory thing too. Um, Okay, it looks like this is like all messed up. I can't do this in order. But I do remember the book I read after that. The first like book that I read. The Gunslinger for Stephen King book that I've finished. Not the first one I started. A couple of the books that I finished in 2020 I'd started earlier and kind of dropped and got back into. But The Gunslinger was a good book. It was a weird book. It was a strange book. The prose is a little weird. The way it's written is weird, but I like that for it. And I made a whole video about how much I like Stephen King, even after just reading a few of his books. So I won't go too much into, what I think of Stephen King. Around that time, I'd started this a couple years ago, and then I finished it, To Kill a Mockingbird. I thought it was a good book. Good characters. I love coming of age stuff. I don't overindulge in coming of age stuff. I'm not always reading like coming of age, but it's always been a thing that I like. And like this is like not a linear. This is like a slice of life thing, and I like that kind of coming of age a lot. And I've made that kind of coming of age with Teen Spirit, and I'm working on more with some other writing projects. Yeah, I know this book has been criticized a couple times for talking about like the black experience back then, and it was written by a white woman. I don't want to get into too much controversial territory here. Right now, the way I think of it is the main character is a white girl, and it was written by a white woman from around that time, from the eyes of a white girl looking at the world. So that's where I come from it now. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe the controversy is correct. But that's kind of how I look at it. Controversies aside, I just thought it was a nice read. Outsiders, the first Stephen King book that I started beyond a few pages and got like maybe a quarter of the way through. Finished it this year. Good book. Not his greatest book. The ending was a little... But great atmosphere. Good horror. Not super scary, but a good mystery and good characters. The first vampire book I read this year, because I'd been wanting to get more into vampire literature, because I've always liked vampires, but I haven't read as much of the literature as I'd like. I read Dracula and a couple others, but years ago. But I read Carmilla, which was a novella from the 1800s about a female vampire. It's kind of a pulp book, but it was actually before Dracula, and it inspired Dracula quite a bit. And in sort of a deleted scenes chapter of Dracula that was supposed to be the first chapter, but then was published later as like a separate Dracula story, has some references to this book, or one reference actually. But so this was a good book. It has some clear, surprising for the time, but it has some pretty clear like lesbian like coding in it. That at the time I'm pretty sure only people in that community would be able to notice, but it has been regarded sort of as this pretty surprisingly progressive piece for the time, because the apparent gayness of the vampire and her victim. I've heard that some people were like, it portrays being a lesbian as like a bad thing because the lesbian's the vampire, but again, going into the controversial territory that's kind of scary to go into. Right now, the way I think of it is the vampire is lesbian, but so is apparently the main character, who is a good guy, or bi or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, I don't think it was portraying being gay as this bad thing, but maybe he was. I don't know. So I don't know. And I don't know for that. But I did like the book. It's good. He used the word languid way too much, I noticed. It's like on every page. That was one thing I noticed. I reread a couple books this year. I reread a couple kids' books. Chronicles of Narnia, The Horse and His Boy. I barely remembered this book. I have a pretty good memory of the other Narnia books, most of them, but this one, I didn't really remember what happened. I knew they're in like some Middle East inspired place, but I reread it, and I thought it was good. I thought it was, it actually might be my favorite of the Narnia books. Very different from the others, different characters, very different setting. It's a fun read. Read it in a couple days, because it's pretty short. And then I also, this other kid's book I reread from my childhood, because I saw some like horror booktuber who was still really into Goosebumps. I was like, oh, maybe I'll give Goosebumps another try. So I took the one Goosebumps book that I own and I reread it. It's like, oh yeah, it's good. I don't know. It's hard to enjoy as an adult, as much as I did when I was a kid. But it's good. It's not bad. And I think there are better Goosebumps books than this one, but whatever. Welcome to Dead House. First one. I read The Shining, which might be the best book I've read last year, 2020. A lot of good things to be said about The Shining. This is not my copy. This is my dad's old copy from 80s or 90s. Bad cover. That is like the worst book cover ever. But very good book. Feel like people already know what The Shining's about. And people have said a lot about it. I liked it better than the movie. I know some people like the movie better, but I did like this better than the movie. Better character, better pacing, better character arc, and in my opinion, more scary and intense. But I could see why people would think the movie is more scary and intense. I read. Let's see if it's still recording. Okay. I read the first two books in A Song of Ice and Fire. By the way, this year's like been sort of my really getting into fantasy, because I've always loved fantasy, but I'm not as well read in it as I want to be. Sort of like with Batman. But I read the first two in A Song of Ice and Fire. I'd seen the first like 2.5 seasons of the show before, so I knew kind of what happened, especially in the first one, because it's the more memorable season in my opinion, but still very enjoyable to read. Beautiful prose, good characters, very long. This one was better than the second one, I think. A lot more happened. There was more of this like mystery that was going on. Second one was, it was a little slower, and it took a lot longer to read. It took me a long time to get through it for some reason, but it was good. They're both good. This one's better. Game of Thrones. I read The Art of War this year. The only nonfiction book I finished. A couple others I kind of started and have been slowly going through. It takes a while for me to read nonfiction, but The Art of War is only like, 13 chapters or so? This is all introduction stuff. Like, who writes a preface this long? I don't know. But I didn't read all that because it's not The Art of War. It's someone's thoughts on The Art of War. I just wanted to read The Art of War. Maybe this is good and maybe this is interesting, but I just wanted to read that good Sun Tzu. You know what I mean? So, this is good. It was, it's applicable to many things in life. Sci-fi book I read this year, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Did a video on this separately, so I won't talk too much about it. First book in the Wayfarers trilogy, still the only one that I've read out of it, but I will read the others. I have one of them. Great characters. Liked it a lot. Good world building. Book I read this year that was kind of like a more impulsive want to read. The Truth About Keeping Secrets by Savannah Brown. The way I found this book was I was looking on YouTube about like self-publishing tips, because I'm self-publishing, and then the author of this had a video about that, and I was like, oh, she's got some interesting thoughts. I wonder if she's a good writer. So I checked out some of her poetry, a little sample of her book, and I was like, wow, this is good. And I was getting this like strong vibe from this book. I was like, you gotta read this. And it's not the usual type of book I read. It's another coming of age thing. I know I said I like coming of age a lot, but it's not, I don't know, it's just not a book you would think like me, this kind of a fantasy horror mystery guy would be super into. But it was good. It was really well written. The prose was excellent. Word choice, that sort of thing. Well, I wouldn't say the prose is excellent. It's very stylistic. I think it's an excellent style. I think she might have gone a little overboard with her personal style in a couple places. That's more of a technical thing. Well, kind of a technical thing, kind of a artistic thing. But this is her debut novel, and I thought it was good. Let's get through the others. King books I read this year. Misery, Stephen King, one of the best books I've read. Annie Wilkes, fantastic character. Paul Sheldon's a good character. And just so much suspense in this book. It's rare that there's a book that's like that suspenseful. There's a lot of suspense out there, but it's like anxiety, misery. Salem's Lot, another one of my favorite books I've read. I don't know, like in a critical literary sense, it's like one of the best, but it was a very good book, very atmospheric. Maybe the most atmospheric book I've read. I'm reading it right now, and I feel like, and that's famous for its atmosphere, but this has more, I'd say, better atmosphere. New England vampires in the town, and there's this slow build of there's the terror in the town and vampires, and I love vampires, as I've mentioned, and I like Stephen King a lot. I love Stephen King's books so far, and so it's like perfect for me. I read, along with some short stories, I read two Sherlock Holmes books from the original Sherlock Holmes series by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I'd started last year, I started The Sign of the Four, and I finished it this year. That was good. It wasn't the best Sherlock Holmes ever. It was good. And I read A Study in Scarlet, which was very good. It kind of went off track a little bit with the whole story about Utah in the middle of it, but it was, Sherlock Holmes. Come on. It's good stuff. It's good mystery. Look at this. This is the complete collection. All of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock, and this is like the first edition that has all of it, the complete collection in it, from like 1937 or 8. So, 1938. So it's not a super fancy looking one, but it was a good find, and I'm proud of this book. I'm proud of this addition to my collection. I'm happy I have it. Makes me happy. I read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Hear a lot of great things about Brandon Sanderson. Watch some of his lectures on YouTube, and so I was like, I gotta read some stuff that he's put out. Read Mistborn. I'm gonna read more, the rest of the series and other Sanderson books. It was a good book, as you might have guessed, from what I've been saying. Good characters, good plot, great world and world building, well paced, and just a fun book. It's a fun book, and it was a good book. The Haunting of Hill House, another one of the best books I've read this year. It's so different, like, even more different, I'd say, than The Gunslinger from your usual book, and just the way it's written, and you just feel this character who's kind of crazy and goes crazier and madder. It's different from the show. The show has this kind of the same vibe, but the show is pretty different from the book, and it's a different story than the book. But it's not like this overt, like, oh my god, such suspense kind of horror, but it's just this atmosphere and this dread you feel, and this just confusion, and you're in this character who's just absolutely crazy's head. And the ending, I thought, was just the scariest, weirdest, creepiest thing. Fantastic book, and it was a great influence on Stephen King as well. And part of the first chapter is actually quoted in Salem's Lot. I also read Frankenstein this year. I read the ebook version. I also read the ebook version of Carmilla, but then I wanted a physical copy, so I got one. I also want a physical copy of Frankenstein, but hasn't gotten it. That was a good book. Took me a while to read because it's kind of written in that old flowery way, and I don't know. It's fun to read, but I don't know. It's one of those books. It's good, but it takes a while. Especially for me. Sometimes I have trouble, like, reading books super fast, but I'm okay with it because I get to enjoy books longer that way. A couple books I started in 2020 that I haven't finished. Interview with the Vampire, another long time to read. Almost done with it. I started it. Taking me a while, but then again, look at all that. Very atmospheric. Interview with the Vampire is beautifully written. The Night Circus. Keep bringing up atmosphere, but also very atmospheric and fun and whimsical. And just, hashtag aesthetic. And, yeah. Let me just double check my list here. Alright, and that is all of the books that I read in 2020. And of course, I also read 8 Stings by Miles Bunning, coming to Amazon March 10th. Get it. Oh my god. Okay. Alright, so thanks for watching me ramble about the books I read, and if you like reading, happy reading. If you're looking to get back into reading, I encourage you to do so. Maybe try what I did, and yeah, just have fun with it. And if you want to see more of what I have to say about things, and if you want to keep updated about my book that's coming out and my other projects that will come out in the future, consider subscribing and throw a like if you like the video. Alright, I'll catch you next time. Good evening, Malay.